Good afternoon. How are you today? Good. You're very good, right? All right. Joe Lonsdale likes to say that he is a lucky guy. And he is. Yet, if we were to listen to the ancient Roman philosopher Seneca, who said, luck is where opportunity meets preparation, we would know that Joe Lonsdale is also a man who is always prepared to meet opportunity. Now, I would go even further. Joe is a man who creates opportunity, and he does this really well. Joe is a serial entrepreneur. He's a founding partner at On8 VC, a San Francisco-based venture capital fund. He was also a founding partner at Formation 8, the precursor fund to On8 VC, which manages over $1.5 billion and is one of the top performing private funds in the Valley. He also co-founded Palantir, a $15 billion global software company best known for its work in defense and finance. After co-founding Palantir, he co-founded Edipar. In fact, he founded Edipar, a leading wealth management technology platform where he's still the chairman, as well as OpenGov. Joe was also an early executive at Peter Thiel's Clarion Capital, which they grew into a large global macro hedge fund. And while he was at Stanford, where he earned his degree in computer science in 2003, he interned with the financial arm of PayPal. Currently, he also serves on several boards, including Edipar, OpenGov, Affinity, Illumio, Radius, Hyperloop One, and Wish. And today, we are the lucky ones. Having Joe Lonsdale share his insights on technology and entrepreneurship is indeed an honor for us. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much for having us here today. I want to make sure we have time to get to questions, so I guess I'll just give some backgrounds and thoughts on what we're working on, and most interested in talking about what you guys want to talk about. We're very big fans of Waterloo here. My longtime business partner, Alex Kolosich, actually graduated in 2008 and has helped us hire and meet lots of people here. It's actually his birthday today, so we'll have to wish him a happy birthday afterwards. I think this is clearly one of the places with the very top talent in North America. It also has the best talent to architecture ratio, I have to say, as well. But we do really enjoy coming here. I was surprised to be like baking as I walked through there. I think you got to work on the window thing for the engineers. But no, this is absolutely an amazing place, and it's exciting how fast it's growing. One of the efforts we're actually working on right now, a lot of you guys probably, hopefully already have heard of, is something called Terminal. My friend Jack Abraham. Jack is also an entrepreneur who's built a lot of companies in the Valley, and I've been lucky to get to work with him. And we have a big challenge there where Silicon Valley hasn't done a good job building housing, so the costs have gone up dramatically. It's very, very expensive to live in the Valley. The quality of life, unfortunately, not as strong as it could be given how expensive it is. And so we thought for a lot of our companies, let's build offices here and let's hire people here. And obviously, it's not that hard here to work for one of the very big companies. But I think the most exciting thing to do in terms of how much you learn and also in terms of the impact on the world is to be a key member of a team of a fast-growing startup and to join a startup that's working with 20, 30, 50 people at that company. And so we want to help those most exciting companies come here, build offices of 10, 20, 30 engineers, and really access the top talent that way. And I don't know exactly how the culture here works yet. In Silicon Valley, the very most talented engineers are oftentimes excited to go to these kind of fast-growing startups, and those are the most competitive jobs in Silicon Valley, and so we'd like to open that here and create that dynamic here for a lot of them as well. And so it's called Terminal. We're going to open that up, and we've already hired, I guess, 100 people here, and we're hopefully going to hire a couple thousand more in the area over the next few years. And so we'd love to get people's thoughts on that and how we figure that out and make sure we make it a way to kind of build the community here in the right way. My other hope about that is that I think a lot of people who work at these fast-growing startups, they learn so much that then they oftentimes do their own startup, and the next startup they build is a lot stronger because they've learned from being part of something that's working really well. And so that's a lot of how Silicon Valley works, is that every time there's a success, you build new successes based on that. So the more we can expose the community here to those successes, we can learn how to work together to build more here too. So that's something I'm very bullish on this area in the next decade. Maybe just a little bit, I'll give some background on 8 VC and what we're focused on, who we are. So 8 VC is a venture capital firm. We currently have a seed fund that does really early stuff. We have kind of our core venture fund, which is larger. It's like, I guess it's like 450 million or so, and that invests in Series A's and B's. A Series A is like your first institutional round where you're raising like $3 to $10 million. A B tends to be $10 to $25 million. And then we have about 32 people in the firm, and most of the partners have all built lots of companies themselves. So the big focus is kind of working with entrepreneurs, helping them, connecting them. The way we also have like a follow-on fund, so we do some later stage investing as well. But the main thing we're focused on is kind of those early Series A's and B's, and the goal is to get really involved and kind of be partners to the entrepreneur. The ethic always for these sorts of things is that the founders should be running their companies. We're very focused on founder-first companies. But the question is, how can we complement them? What skills can we bring in? And so we have about 70 or 80 advisors, most of whom have built their own companies, but also people who've run large companies in different industries that kind of officially come in and try to help our companies and work with them depending on what they're doing. And then we also have a pretty good global network of people. So really, part of your job as a VC is to build community and is to connect people. So if you're building something that makes sense and it's working, and you need to get to the person who runs the Fortune 500 company, it's our job to figure out how to do that, how to make that happen, and how to coach you on maybe the way to approach them in the right way. When I was first building Palantir, when I was really young, you'd go to the CIA and FBI, and you'd want to try to come across and get taken seriously, and they kind of think, that's nice to meet you, little kid. You come back later when you have a real thing going on. And so figuring out how you approach these places, and getting to know George Tenet, who ran the CIA before, getting to know some of these high net worth individuals who'd worked on things with them around the world, and then coming in with those people in the right way, presenting it the right way, all of a sudden you get taken a lot more seriously. In my case, I had to hire someone who's 15 years older who was really good at this. It turns out that for certain enterprise software, even though the young people are building it, it actually helps to have someone with more experience to come across the right way and sell it, at least is my point of view. Like you kind of have a combination there, which was, at least for me, necessary. Some people are more mature than I was when you're 21, so you could figure that out. But anyway, there's a lot of lessons and things like that. And so to focus on what are we doing in AVC, what are the big themes? I think the best investing is always opportunistic. There's probably people here who've already figured out something amazing that I've never thought of before that's going to be absolutely huge. But I think there are certain themes right now that are the main themes that we're excited about. The biggest theme that we've been focused on for the last decade is what I call the kind of smart enterprise wave. And so the basic idea in Silicon Valley is that at any given time, there's certain things that are possible, and you're trying to figure out, like, based on what's possible, what's going to happen, and how you're going to have a really big impact. And there's been a lot that's become possible in the last 10 years with the cloud and with big data and with using data to run big industries that needs to kind of roll out to fix the economy. So the way we look at it is, we were talking about this earlier, basically around the 1970s, 1980s, a lot of the very first software got built that runs most major industries. So even today, if you go into almost any government organization, any bank, any logistics company, any hospital, there's stuff there that's probably running from the 1970s or 80s that's kind of processing their inventory, processing their payroll, processing all sorts of basic processes and keeping track of stuff. And the reason it's there is it's worked really well for 50 years. But the problem is nowadays, as you all know, there's 1,000 times as much data. And your job running these industries is to use data to make better choices. And so the thing you start to learn about big industries pretty quickly, the more time you spend with them, is it's like they're really broken compared to what they could be if they were using their data better. So in logistics, for example, there's millions, I don't know the stats for Canada, but around America, there's literally like millions of miles of like trucks driving in parallel that are both less than half full, where they could, where the similar place left from similar destination. It's obviously just that they didn't know how to coordinate, because that's a very hard data coordination problem. They may even be competitors, but even though they're competitors, if they had coordinated and used one truck, that would have actually saved everyone money and been good for the environment. And that's just like it's a silly data problem. But there's examples of this in every industry. Like when you're going to issue a mortgage, we actually could figure out, like one of our companies, Blend, it's like the costs are actually like a fourth of what they were before, because you can bring all the data automatically together for the process of how you help the bank issue the mortgage and figure it all out. But there's literally probably about 200 industries right now where there's specific vertical platforms where there's problems around kind of using data to make that part of the industry work better. And so unlike the consumer wave, where there's only really kind of 20 or so really big consumer companies that came out of those 20 years, those are the really impactful ones. We think there's more like 200 companies coming out of this kind of smart enterprise wave to really fix things specifically in different industries. I was just at RubiCloud earlier today in Toronto, which really amazing team. I'm very bullish on a lot of people from Waterloo there, and doing something similar for back end of retail for the same things. How do you use all this data to run a retail store better? How can you be more like Amazon and learn from what they're doing? And there's all these challenges there. So that's one area that we're really excited about. It needs a lot of really great engineers. Probably still see a lot more companies being built there in the next few years. The other one I'd say is even more recent. So again, I think that the hardest question is like, what's possible now that wasn't even possible 3 years ago? And that's okay. Well, what is going on in the world that's new, just really, really recently? And our best answer to that we've been spending a lot of time on in the last few years, is that a lot of areas of biological science have become information problems. And so obviously you guys have probably heard about CRISPR. Who knows what CRISPR is? I'm curious. Okay, so about a third of you or so. So as an example, CRISPR was a really big breakthrough. A friend of ours, Jennifer Doudna, is a scientist at Berkeley, and she was collaborating with Feng Zhang at the Broad Institute at MIT, and they were studying basically this new system that emerged from bacteria. So it turns out that bacteria and viruses have been at war for like 3 or 4 billion years. For most of evolution, that's the only thing that's been around is bacteria and bacteriophages or viruses, and they're constantly trying to kill each other, and they're constantly evolving new ways of killing each other and new ways of stopping that from happening. And it turns out that one of the most important weapons bacteria developed is this part of their immune system that if a virus causes them trouble, they take something and they snip a piece of the virus's DNA, they put it in their own DNA, along with some messages next to it so they know what it is. And then when other viruses come in, they use that to create the RNA and to go search and look and say, oh, if it's the same one that causes me trouble, I know what it is, I know it's there, I know I can go after it and try to snip it or kill it or whatever. And so it turned out that in evolving this, they evolved like the most efficient way we've ever seen to very accurately write DNA. And so it turns out there's something called a Cas9 protein paired with an RNA, and it can very quickly search and find DNA and either cut it, insert it places, snip it, all sorts of different types of protein and things you could do there. And the reason this is really important is it's like a computer basically. It's basically automatically with trillions of DNA somewhere very quickly scan and find the right one and do something to it. So it becomes this like all-purpose machine that works for plants and animals and everything. And so when you can really quickly and easily edit these things, then on top of that, as you guys know, the cost of reading DNA has just gone down dramatically to the point where it's very, very cheap now to, for example, we used to have 3,000 types of bacteria in our guts, and as your health changes, the bacteria that are present change. And now we have a company, I probably shouldn't say how much, but it's a very, very small amount of money where they can just measure exactly what all the bacteria are in your gut, exactly what's going on. And once you do that for 200,000 people, as they've done, they can say, oh, well, every time someone has Crohn's disease, it's like this pattern shows up. So like I say, this person has a 99% chance of Crohn's disease, or this person has a 99% chance of inflammatory bowel disease, or whatever else, right? So there's all this data available. So both with like the reading and the writing and experimentation and iterating and building things, it's all become a giant IT problem to map out. And it's not to say you don't need the scientists, you do. You need good biological scientists, but if they don't have really good engineers, then they're in big trouble. So there's a bunch of companies now growing fast in the microbiome, in iterative gene editing, experimentation, the infrastructure for gene editing, that are all growing very fast, and mainly in Silicon Valley where we are, because it's the combination of the scientists and the IT. So anyway, that's a very exciting area. I could talk to you about that one all day, but we can always answer more questions if people are interested. I guess the other thing I'd say is just talking a little bit about advice. I'm not sure exactly how much people here are interested in entrepreneurship. I assume you're somewhat interested in entrepreneurship if you're here. I think the most important thing I did at Stanford, we were talking about earlier, was just getting to know all the other people who I can work on projects with and who I thought were people I'd want to work with later on. So no matter what you're learning here, like learning who else you respect and then learning how to get them to work with you on things, that's probably like one of the most important things you could do if you want to build companies. Like I always say, I am a very lucky guy, but I think my best skill was I have lots of smart friends. I was good at convincing them to help me build things, and that's like absolutely critical if you want to kind of accomplish things and create things in the world. So don't forget when you're kind of working on your classes and solving your hard problems and going yourself to meet everyone. Like make sure you have a big advantage being here in school to figure out who else is really smart and who else you can kind of be able to bring in and ally with together. Because I think the best use of these universities is to meet your peers and to learn how to work with them. So I think that's a key thing. I guess the other thing I'd say, we kind of already mentioned, but if you want to get involved in startups, don't go work for Google. It's not going to teach you how to be at a startup. It's going to teach you how to be at Google or Microsoft or LinkedIn. If you want to be involved in a startup, be involved in a startup. It's a very, very different company if something's growing really fast versus something that's a standard big company. It feels a little bit messier. There's a great business book called In the Tornado, which was the follow-up to So basically, there's a book called Crossing the Chasm, where it's like how a startup gets from like very beginning early adopters to start to grow. It's Crossing the Chasm is a famous term we use a lot in the Valley. And the next book the author wrote is called In the Tornado, and he kind of went over 10 different companies that had all grown at over 100% a year for almost 10 years, because that's what you have to do to build a big company. You grow at a high rate for a long time. And it's just very, very different being in a company that's in the tornado versus one that's already kind of a big dominant company. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people make at these schools is they go and they work at a very large company and think that they're going to learn about startups. It's fine. You have a fine career. You're never going to starve. All of you are going to do great, especially if you know how to work at a big company. So it's really a choice what you're interested in. But if you are interested in building things, it's a huge mistake to go to a big company, is my view. Let's see. Well, I think there's a lot more we could talk about what the fund's focused on, but I'd actually would love to get some more questions from you guys, and we can maybe iterate that way. But thanks a lot for having me here.
Anyone?
Oh, and while you're figuring out who to ask, let me add one more thing. There is a fellowship program as well that we're really excited about. So one of the you can give the microphone to someone, and we'll just finish. One of the things that that really benefited me when I was younger, I worked at PayPal while I was at school, and I got to meet a lot of the people at PayPal who started companies like YouTube and LinkedIn and Yelp were all being built, shortly after that. And so getting that exposure to multiple startups was actually a great way for me to help decide what I wanted to work out, what I wanted to build. So for the fellowship program, what we're doing is I guess it's only a small number of people, but whoever gets into the fellowship, we're going to take them out. They get to work for one of the top fast-growing companies, but they also get to meet all the other ones and kind of learn from us for a summer about what's going on in the Valley. So we're hoping to find some top students we can kind of teach about Silicon Valley with it, and if you guys are interested.
My question is, what advice do you have for choosing between startups or choosing a startup to work at that's fast-growing, and what kind of questions?
Sure. So I think the number one variable for these startups is the other talent there. So where do you feel like you're most impressed by the people who they're really great engineers, there's great leaders you think you can learn from. So the quality of talent and your ability to learn. And then secondly, I think this is really important. If you're going to go to a startup, it has to be something you're passionate about. I guess the anecdote I'll give you is I was a competitive chess player when I was younger, and so I try to get to meet all these new guys. And so Magnus Carlsen, who's the greatest chess player ever so far at 26, and I asked him how he studied. And he says that his teacher gives him about 70 hours of homework a week, but he only does the half of it that he's really passionate about, and he spends twice as much time on that. So he does his full 70 hours and the half that he's really interested in. And I think that's the way the human brain works, is you just learn much better and you work much better if you really care about something. Because I think there's parts of your brain that only get turned on if you have this emotional, passionate interaction for something. So don't try to force yourself to do a startup unless you really love it, and then go to a place where people are great. Those are the two I'd say.
Thank you.
Ready?
Cool. Hey Joe, first of all, thanks for coming and talking to us. Had two questions for you. One, are you by any chance coming by the Velocity Garage or Community Tech area in the next little while? And two, what is your opinion on sort of founders in school or people who start companies before they finish graduating?
Sure. So in terms of where we're going, I have to leave that to Kevin. I think he says I am stopping by, so hopefully I'll get to see that. Thank you very much. Kevin's been a great host here. And in terms of starting things in school, I think it's a great way to learn, to try to build something. I go back and forth on what I'd call a startup versus a project. I think if something's really a startup that you're really into, it kind of has to be your focus to the exclusion of everything else. I think if something's a project where you're learning from trying to build something, that's a great way to educate yourself, and that's a very good thing to do in school. I really support programs. I'm very bullish on the way Waterloo is structuring experience, starting things out. I think, though, there's different types of businesses in the world, and if you're trying to do a startup where you're trying to make in Silicon Valley terms, startup means you're trying to make a giant company that has global impact, and with we say multi-billion dollars not because we're focused on the money, but because we're focused on the impact to big industries. And so if you're trying to make a multi-billion dollar startup, that has to be, it's like training for a gold in the Olympics, and you can't train for a gold medal in the Olympics part-time. And so is it worth practicing and starting and trying out? Yes, but at some point, if you get serious about it, it has to be something you're just obsessed with and you're just focused on, to exclusion of a lot of other things. It's a very imbalanced lifestyle to build a great startup correctly, which is why it's not the right thing for everyone. But if you're going to do it, you have to just do it. But I think it's great to practice early.
Hi, so just one question. In your personal experience, how have you seen startups fail?
That's a great question. There's a few different things. One of my favorite versions of this I kind of learned from my friend Sam, who runs Y Combinator, but I experienced it myself too. The best indicator if something is failing is that the founders are not getting back to the investors and the senior people on the board every week or two. So really great companies, the CEOs and people running it, are checking in every week and they're reporting, and I think they're being honest about where they are. They're saying, here's my problems, here's the things I'm working on, here's what's not working, here's what I'm excited about. And you just have a lot of kind of brutally honest iteration. Whereas a lot of startups, it's very clear it's not going quite right, and there's some ego issue where the person doesn't want to admit it's going wrong, and it's not just they're not admitting it to the investors, they're usually not admitting it to themselves, and then they just kind of like fade away quietly, and so I think the biggest thing where things fail is when you're not being honest about what's working. I think another thing where things fail is the early people try to keep too much upside for themselves. I think it's a very, very common mistake where they basically want to hire the fourth person, maybe gets a 0.5% or 1% or whatever, because they say, oh, 1%'s fair and that's fine. And they actually never bring in other people who are as good as them or who are even better than them by being generous and being expansive. So I think being like brutally honest with what's going on, having a mentor you're close touch with and you force yourself to regularly interact with, and being expansive about giving away enough to bring in lots of other great people, I think those two are necessary for not failing.
Hi, Joe. My question is, I heard some other advice for people who want to build a startup. They say that it's better to go into an industry, maybe some big company, and stay there for, like, say, 2 years, and then learn some big issues in the industry, and then you try to tackle this big issue and build a startup of that. What's your comment on this advice?
So I do think you need to be exposed to industries, and you need advisors from industries. I think the reason why there's like 10 or 15 funds in Silicon Valley that have consistently kind of outperformed and are in the center of things. And the reason why those same funds are able to outperform investing across different industries is because the number one variable is not the industry. The number one variable is the technology culture. So I think if you actually see what matters, it's how do you build a very top technology culture, and how do you structure that internally and iterate. And part of that is definitely going to be bringing industry advisors and other people. But I tend to think the vast majority of great companies are built by outsiders. This is very uncomfortable for big institutional people, but it's almost always the outsiders that figure out how to disrupt things and figure out how to change things. And I'd much rather have like a really, really top set of 10 engineers than have a few doctors being my advisors to go after healthcare than to have people who'd worked in medicine for 3 years on the team necessarily. I don't think you need that as much. Eventually when you scale, you do. But I think you want to be outsiders. I think you want to learn how to run a startup. And I listen, there's lots of people who are going to go in industry and then go work at a startup and they'll be fine. I think if you want to build something, learn from other people who are great at building something is my number one advice.
All right, thank you.
Doc.
So one of the companies that you're starting is a company called Shogun. I'm not sure if you can talk too much about it, but if you can probably explain like why or how you even like tackled on creating it. But the second question would also be, how are you co-founding or creating so many companies, and how are you like, I guess, not overseeing, but like how are you progressing all of them at the same time?
Sure, no, that's a great question. So first of all, when I started Palantir, it became like my main focus, and it was what I was really, really pushing forward. And when I started Adipar, I was also CEO and full-time on that, extremely focused on that. And those are the only two companies that I was really like the core founder who was hiring most of the people, along with like people I was co-founding it with. But those were two that I'd say I'd call myself a founder of in the traditional sense. Nowadays, I'm lucky to have a leverage of a lot of smart people around me and to have ideas. But I think I wouldn't ever help start something unless there were amazing people who were full-time, that's all they were focused on, who were running it. And so in Shogun's case, we've been playing with ideas around this for a while. The basic idea is a lot of our companies in our network, at the point of the transaction with the person they're working with, they should be originating credit and they should be originating insurance in order to kind of accelerate the transaction. So I'll give you an example. One of our other companies that my friends started does about $5 billion a year of GMV between contractors and consumers. And so people fixing their homes, and they book them and they make sure it's a safe, good person, and they pay them to remodel their house or whatever. And it turns out that when the contractor and consumer are at that point of agreeing to remodel the house, that's a great point to offer credit to the consumer. It's a great point to check on insurance products and insure things that are going on. And so Shogun helps companies like BuildZoom, in that case, offer that credit, offer that insurance, because there's a lot of regulation, there's a lot of kind of special ability to have to do that. So it's a way to use finance to accelerate and improve transactions in the economy, and we have a bunch of partnerships we're doing there. So this is an idea from studying insurance, studying credit. We realized we had a big advantage of all these origination places. We could be helping companies do it. And the person who studied that with me the most was my chief of staff at the time. And so Anthony came out of Stanford, really smart, really talented guy, comes from a big business family as well, so has a good background in business. And we talked about this a lot and decided he wanted to build it. And so we decided, okay, if you're gonna build it, who do you need to bring in? And we kind of talked about it a lot, and he kind of got some really great lawyer, really great engineers, of course, is the main focus. And he's done a really good job putting a team together. And so I'm kind of like the chairman, but I'm kind of more like the coach. I'm not really I wouldn't call myself a core founder so much as a coach to the core founder who's the CEO. And I think that's a really important distinction, especially early on. You want to found one thing and work on one thing. A lot of really talented young people are like, yeah, I'm so smart that I'm doing these 4 things at once. Look how awesome I am. And that's actually a trap that smart people fall into. You're never going to build something truly great and truly huge unless you just throw yourself entirely into it, is my view. And so I'm not building Shogun. I have someone else is building it, and I'm able to help and coach. The other thing I'd say is after you have one really big win, you have a really big advantage in the technology world for a lot of reasons in terms of talents and capital and stuff. So after you have one really big win, maybe it's responsible to help some more people, but I really would just be 100% focused on one thing when you're starting off, is my bias.
Hi, up here. How can non-technical people build startups? Like, what are the most important skills that they can hone? Instead of, because everyone's like engineer, but like there are a lot of non-technical people who want to start up as well, but they don't have the skill.
Yep. So I think the most important skill, not to be glib, but the most important skill is figuring out who some other really smart engineers are and getting them to be your co-founders. I think co-founding it without really good engineers is a really big mistake. So that's number one. Number two, though, and it's a fair question. A lot of the great companies are actually built by a non-technical and a technical co-founder, and so that partnership can be very strong. I think being a really good communicator, a really good marketer, a really good fundraiser, having networks for fundraising, obviously is a big thing you can bring to the table for your team. I think the other thing I'd say is get to know an industry really, really well, especially with this kind of smart enterprise wave. Like get to know something esoteric about how some parts of industrial companies work that you're passionate about, or get to know something about how a certain part of healthcare works where it's just very broken and needs to be fixed, and become an expert and start having lots of opinions about it, and go and just keep talking to everyone in that field, get to know everyone in that field, like get to the point where you are the expert, you've talked to these people, you've made friends by impressing them, you've written pieces that you've published. So in that point, you're like this expert, you have lots of opinions about it, and then you have this really good technical co-founder. That'd be a great way to kind of go in and do it. But really, I think communication and marketing and fundraising and learning an industry, I guess is the way to say, is your job would be if you're not the engineer.
So my question is regarding the specialization and generalization debate, and you know how you're talking about biotech companies, and a lot of biotech companies hire PhDs in biology, and also it used to be said that you don't need a graduate degree, or you don't even need an undergrad to work in CS jobs. Like what do you think right now is the current balance in theoretical knowledge and also practical?
That's a great question. I think for a lot of the biotech companies, you probably want to have been in a PhD program. Maybe you dropped out, but you probably need to be good enough and deep enough in it that you actually really understood, and we're working in research at a high level. So I don't, that's for the science side. There's both science side and engineering side. There's gonna be engineers who are undergrads who are great at these new kind of bio-IT companies. But if you don't have a great scientist with a lot of depth and a lot of understanding, you're probably not gonna work. So I do think for that wave of companies in particular, it's a combination of a lot of specialized knowledge with general engineering knowledge. Now that said, and I'm not a scientist, so I should be careful how much I opine on things that are important there. But that said, I think even within these fields of bioinformatics, generalization is very helpful in the sense there's a lot of things you have to combine and learn to build. So I think, for example, one of the most exciting areas right now in this kind of bio-IT field is really kind of mammalian cell engineering and understanding the circuits of cells and manipulating the circuits of cells to accomplish certain things with therapies and whatnot. And it's kind of like it's just like general purpose machine we could take and do all these cool things with. And the very, very, very simple version of that would be like when we figured out how to program a T cell to attack certain antigens. And you guys probably saw, like 3 years ago, Kite did this with a really simple virus they programmed, and they took out people's T cells and they got to go after a very certain type of antigen that was present in a blood cancer. And so they took 300 patients that were definitely supposed to die within 3 to 6 months, and they cured 83% of those patients by like reprogramming their T cells, which is awesome, right? So you're saving all these lives, and it just sold for $11 billion, two months ago, whatever about the money. Like they're saving all these lives, and so it's a big impact financially as well. And so I think that's like a very simple version of T cell engineering, and there's like all these other versions of it, and it's going to require both scientists and engineers to figure it out. And but for stuff like that, yeah, I can't just go in as a computer scientist myself and do it. We need specialization too.
Hi, Joe. I was wondering, when you're listening to a pitch, what sort of key indicators of success are you listening for that you think give a company a competitive advantage?
No, that's a good question. These days, I probably would already have heard from my team, so I'd be biased based on what they're worried about. But I guess if I was hearing someone for the very first time, number one would be like the kind of engineering caliber of the team and how they think about engineering and technology problems. Looking for how passionate, really obsessed they are. I want to be convinced that someone is not going to give up on this even when it seems like they may have failed a few times. And that most people are like, it's very hard to get someone who's like just got to be persistent enough for sure. They're going to keep going to win, because most of these companies, you have lots of failures along the way, and that's where people give up. So I think yes, it's engineering talent, persistence, the quality of people around you. I think something really important for me is how much have you gone and talked to people who are senior in industry and gotten their feedback. This is a really important point that this wasn't non-intuitive to me when I first started out. I think when you're young and you're doing these things, you're like, I have this best idea, I'm smarter than all these people, I'm not going to tell them because then they're just going to take my idea, so of course I'm just going to keep it to myself and build it, and that feels intuitively correct. It turns out that's exactly wrong, because what you have to realize is there's lots of people in the world with ideas in these spaces, and if there's 5 of you, pretend there's 5 of you with the same idea in different parts of the world, and let's say 4 of you just work in secret, and 1 of you goes and talks to everyone and gets feedback and improves, like which one's going to win? And it's obviously the 1 of the 5 that just goes and talks to everyone and iterates based on their feedback and learns, because it turns out there's something to learn. So if I'm talking to a company, if they haven't gone and figured out a way to get to top people in the industry, and at least to some degree, and get feedback and iterate and explain what they've learned, then it suggests to me they're not doing it necessarily as correctly. So those types of things I guess you're looking for. The other big thing is understanding how much money you need to get to a certain point, you can then raise more money. Because the annoying thing about startups, the financials are a very big part of it, in the sense that it's like you're always about to run out of money and you die by running out of money. So the question is, how much resources do you need, and what point are you going to get to on those resources, and how are you thinking expansively about that? So I guess there's a lot of things for this, I guess, but those are some of the things I think about.
Thank you.
Okay, one more question, and then Joe is going to stay here for 15 minutes. You can talk to him face to face. One more question. Who's the lucky person? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Hi, Joe. I was just wondering, as someone who's kind of interested in like the startup culture and maybe doing their own startup, what advice would you give to someone who hasn't found the problem they're looking to solve or their passion in a certain industry?
My advice would be to find someone you really admire and think is talented who has found an idea, and to partner with them as best you can. Because the thing I'd say is, starting a startup, it's a little bit too much in our culture, like, oh, you're so great because you're building a startup. I think building a startup, first of all, is pretty miserable. You're not supposed to be like, you're supposed to be training for a gold medal, right? You're supposed to be obsessed. Like if you're taking all of your weekends and taking it easy at night and spending time partying with friends, you're not really building a startup. You're just saying you're building a startup. So building a startup is a really hard, really intense thing. You don't want to do it unless you're obsessed with an idea. It's just not worth doing unless you're like, this idea is amazing and I'm gonna make it work, and I'm not gonna listen to any other alternative other than just diving into this and crushing it, and this is what I'm doing for the next several years. So if you don't have an idea that's like driving you that hard, and you're a talented person, you know there are smart people, find someone else who has something working, and it's a lot more pleasurable. You're gonna probably make more money on average. You're gonna learn more on average, being part of something that's working with great people that you can learn from. And so I definitely think that's the right thing to do. You only want to start it if you don't have another option.
All right, thank you.
Joe, we are truly lucky today. We want to say thank you for coming. A small little gift to remind you of Waterloo Engineering. And may you come back again and again and again and bring the great weather. Okay.